And hello, everyone. Welcome to this final episode of QC Brief. I'm here with Michael Forian. The campaign ended. If you haven't catch that episode, of course, it's too late now because the elections happened. So there's no point in watching that episode. But Michael, how's it going, buddy?
It's going, and George, as they say, all good things must finally come to an end.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Both the election campaign and this podcast, but maybe we'll be back for a
Yeah.
different iteration or
Yeah,
something.
no. This podcast doesn't end. This podcast won't end. This was
Exactly.
just a special for the campaign, and we can
Exactly.
we can transform this any which way we like.
Anyway,
Um, so let's just take up from where we left off on the last episode on Monday. That was election day. We were talking a little bit about what had happened during the campaign, what we were projecting the results would be. Um, yeah, surprised at all, but obviously nobody's surprised by the results. I mean, everyone was expecting the CAC to make a government. People were saying at least the last week into the campaign that the Liberals would pretty much secure the opposition. It
yeah.
would probably be status quo in the parliament, and that's exactly what happened. In terms of results, though, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, so just the seat count, 90 seats for the CAC, 21 for the POQ, which will be forming official opposition, 11 for Quebec Solidaire, 3 for the PQ, and a big fat zero for the Conservative Party of Quebec. Now, I think that we all thought that, the CAC was going to, again, perform reasonably well. I did have them a little bit higher. I had them at around 95, maybe even touching 100 seats
Same.
because they were that competitive in so many of the races, especially in and around the island of Montreal. And the POQ, I think also, they as much as the CAC underperformed, I think the PLQ overperformed expectations for many of us that were expecting them to, collapse at this point.
Yeah.
They did lose 10 seats. They went from 31 that they gained in 2018 down to 21. Now, of course, they started off with a much lower number than that in 31 because of resignation, subsequent by-elections that were picked up by the CAC. So in any case, they weren't starting off with that 31 number that they had in the 2018 election. But I think it is important that if we're going to be comparing from one election to another, that's the way that we
Right.
be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Quebec Solidaire, again, I think that they maintained the status quo. They picked up one seat, so they were able, and they lost a seat also in the Greater Quebec City area. Sorry, not in the
Oh,
Rouyn-Noranda, rather. Excuse me.
in Abitibi, yeah.
Exactly, Rouyn-Noranda. They lost a seat there, which is going to be a big gain for the CAC because that is the riding where there is the Fonderie de Rouyn-Noranda up there, where it's obviously been causing a lot of controversy and a lot of environmental concerns for the residents up there, and has been really giving the Legault some difficult days in the media, especially as Minister of the Environment, on the issues that are going up over there. So the fact that he's able to obtain a seat in that area, take it away from QS, really does fit with his narrative that, listen, it's not as bad as people are saying it is. I've got the situation under control. And look, I've got the tip of the hat from the population over there giving me their confidence to go forward and to represent them in the National Assembly. And then with the PQ, listen, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been zero, and it ended up being 3. So, conserving stronghold ridings that they had previously, and then also picking up the biggest win of the night, I think, for any leader. And this was, obviously I would say maybe a make it or break it, was the winning for PSPP of his riding in Camille Lorrain,
Yeah.
beating the CAC candidate Richard Campeau in the riding in Eastern Montreal. So that was a huge victory on that front
Yeah,
there.
that was big for him. Let me go back to what you're saying about the results because we both,
Yeah.
I think, had the CAC higher and we both had the Liberals lower.
Yes.
Do you think that whole immigration thing came into play the last 5-6 days? Do you think that moved the needle a bit, especially in the ridings in Laval, the South Shore, west of Montreal?
I think it hardened the CAC base where they were already sure to win,
Mm-hmm.
or were on track to win way before this came into play. And I think that in areas like Montreal, like ridings like Maurice Richard, certain Laval ridings that they weren't able to capture, like let's say Mille, Chamédé, in Brossard and Lapinière, these very heavy multi-culti ridings where, had a comment like that not been made, they may have been able to pick up those four or so ridings, maybe even more. I'm just giving those as four examples because those have a higher concentration of multicultural groups, of ethnic groups, and that's pertinent to the immigration comments on that front. However, there is definitely an appetite within the CAQ for comments that are anti-immigrant, that are maybe not as inclusive or as diverse as other political parties' opinions, such as the Quebec Liberal Party. When you see and when you break down how close it was in ridings like Beauce-Sud and in the Beauce-Nord, we're talking a few hundred votes between the CAQ winning, which they did, and the PCQ winning, which again was only a few hundred votes away. I think that's the difference between certain rhetoric, because some people will feel more secure saying, you know what, Legault, he's going to come in, he's going to really keep a cap on immigration, keeping it at 50,000 per year. That's something that that speaks to me. And his comments, what he's talking about Montreal no longer having a say in our affairs, that resonates with me. And I feel that he's speaking their language when he's speaking to them. Do I agree with it? Not necessarily, but I do think that maybe it saved him from, in the end, he had to cut off the fat in Montreal, trim the fat there in order to save his furniture over in the Beauce and those areas where the PCQ was looking to make some gains, where they made none whatsoever. That's a huge defeat for Eric Duhaime. But I don't think he's going anywhere. We've discussed this before. I think he's going to be staying on for the long run, and he's going to be going the route of Maxime Bernier, having zero representation inside of the Assembly, but trying to build a movement and continue to build this movement from the outside. Fundraising is going to be important for him. Rallies of this nature, keeping the government accountable when it comes to if we have an increase of COVID measures, increase of COVID cases and COVID measures as we approach the wintertime. That's going to be something to watch. What is Duhaime going to do on that front? Now he's going to take it easy. Now he's going to take it slow. And I think all party leaders and all parties are taking a break right now. But that's going to be certainly one to watch.
I mean, let's look at it regionally, because what you're saying probably did save Legault in the greater Quebec region. It definitely blocked him from, making gains in Montreal. Even though he lost Camille Lorrain to the PQ, he did gain Anjou. He took that from the Liberals. So at the end of the day, he's still left with 2 seats in Montreal. But
which was expected.
Yeah, they were expecting Anjou. But remember, we were talking about Maurice Richard going potentially to the CAQ. I thought they were going to make maybe 1 or 2 gains. Maurice Richard being one of them, and Marquette being the second, which Marquette, at the end, Enrico Ciccone won with a very comfortable majority. The other 2 seats that we were questioning on the island of Montreal were Verdun and Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne. So Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne being Dominique Anglade's seat, Verdun being Isabelle Mélenchon's seat. Verdun went to Quebec Solidaire, and finally Dominique Anglade was able to maintain her seat.
Well, was able to maintain her seat with having, to my understanding, from what I'm hearing at the PLQ, having basically everybody at the permanence, at the PLQ headquarters, go and do phone calls for her door to door. She had no volunteers from her own riding association, from her own campaign, and had to rely on volunteers coming from the party headquarters. That says a lot about how there's poor groundwork in her riding.
Yeah.
The only thing that saved her was, again, any party leader is going to have a certain popularity effect because they're center stage, they're in the debates, they're in the news, they're plastered all over the media. They're going to get a certain boost in their own riding because of the profile they're getting, because they are a major party leader. That, along with the fact that she had volunteers on the ground coming from other campaigns, coming from the headquarters, I think was able to put her over the edge safely and securely.
Speaking of Montreal, of course, Quebec Solidaire made those 2 gains in Maurice Richard and in Verdun, which is huge for them. And it comes back to what we were saying in a couple episodes, where is Quebec Solidaire and the Liberal Party of Quebec reduced to just regional parties with marginal support? And it seems that that's the case. I mean, with the exception of the 1 seat Quebec Solidaire was able to hold on to in Sherbrooke, and the 2 in Quebec, Jean Lesage.
They kept
Jean Lesage and Taschereau. So aside from those 3 seats out in the region, essentially Quebec Solidaire and the Liberals are just stuck on the island of Montreal, because even the Liberals have one seat outside of Montreal, which is Pontiac, which is André Fortin. And if you consider Laval and the South Shore, I mean, I still consider it Montreal, but I mean, you have Lapinière, Chambéry, and Mille-Îles that are outside of Montreal, but theoretically it's still Montreal. Aside from that, I mean,
zero representation in Quebec City, zero representation in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean area, nowhere in the north, nowhere
in the east.
The eastern townships is wiped out for them. So there's nothing there. They weren't able to. And again, when we're talking about there's nothing there, if you look at the breakdown riding by riding, we're talking in some ridings outside of Montreal, 5% I've seen, 6%. My understanding is that there's only 35 ridings, and this is very important for financial calculations for reimbursements from the DGEQ. Only 35 ridings for the Quebec Liberal Party were able to get more than 15% of the vote. Now, I believe that 15% is the threshold in terms of being able to, in terms of getting reimbursed.
Yeah.
Is it half of your expenses, George, if I'm correct, or your complete expenses for the?
I think it's the complete expenses.
The complete expenses. So you think about that, they're only able to get the expenses reimbursed for them. This is a big financial hit for them, and 35 ridings out of 125. That is embarrassing, and that is a huge detriment to them financially going forward. Now, and again, looking in the Quebec City region, looking up in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, looking in the Estrie, 5%, 8%, some 11, 12, 13%, but mostly single digits and low teens. That is not going to bode well for the future of the party. And again, I think that also goes into the future of Dominique Anglade as leader, because seeing what people have been saying going forward in regards to the keeping her on as leader, that to me is just, I know. I don't see how there's a path forward.
Neither do I. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. Before we get there, let me just finish with a couple of areas. Sherbrooke, surprise for me. I was convinced that Caroline Saint-Hilaire was going to pull it off for the CAQ. Hats off to the Quebec Solidaire incumbent M&A over there that was able to keep it. She did a fantastic job. And Caroline Saint-Hilaire, I mean, this is a heavyweight. She's never lost a political campaign. She had 4 mandates with the Bloc Québécois. She had 2 mandates as a mayor in Longueuil. She was a heavyweight. Like in terms of the new candidates coming in for the CAQ, I think Caroline Saint-Hilaire with Bernard Drainville were probably the 2 top candidates that they had. And I kind of felt bad. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say that I hope she won or whatever, because I'm happy that Quebec Solidaire maintained it, but at the same time, I was convinced that Caroline Saint-Hilaire was coming into the National Assembly. So good on. I think,
and you know what, she'll get an ambassadorship post, or at least a Quebec version of an ambassadorship post, delegate general post somewhere, be it Paris or New York City, or some sort of posting if she wants that, or we'll head up something more at home here in Quebec as part of a. The Quebec the bureaucracy. She'll be able to head something up, an appointment in essentially. So my point, my order and council appointments. My point being is that she'll be fine in terms of being taken care of in that respect. She ran a good campaign. I think everybody gives her that and that kind of credibility. But there was also people like Martine Biron, former Radio Canada journalist who was running in the Chaudière-Appalaches. Did very considerably well, was able to fend off the Conservatives over there and ensure that they didn't capture any seats over in that region just north of the Beauce. So my point being is that there's still I think pretty good there's pretty good people in terms of Legault wanting to use this caucus to build.
Absolutely, and he's gonna have a tough time selecting his cabinet, which
and again, the blessing in disguise would have been if he had received 70 seats or 80 seats,
which would be easier for him. Exactly.
Oh my goodness, for sure. Yeah. Now he's got too many good candidates. He's gonna have a lot of disappointed faces.
Yeah. Last but not least, I want to talk about Eastern Quebec, where the PQ had most of their seats, and they got decimated. With the exception of Matane-Matapédia, which we knew, and Gaspésie in
Magdalen Islands,
Île de la Madeleine, and of course the 3rd seat being in Montreal.
Yeah,
pretty bad for the PQ. I mean, ridings like Duplessis and these are heavy PQ ridings that just went down. They just fell like a sandcastle.
No, for sure. And I mean, this is, again, as much as I see Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon keep staying on as leader, they don't really have much of a choice at this point, because I don't think anybody else wants the job. This is an end of an era for sure. I don't see how they're able to maintain any type of party status, with 3 seats in itself.
That's going to be negotiated in the coming days, but it's tough.
Exactly.
It's tough. How do you make an exception? Like even Quebec Solidaire, I mean, just for everyone listening, to have the status of, the official status of a party, you need 12 seats. Quebec
Or
Solidaire has
20% of the
or 20,
population,
yeah, or
which they don't
20%,
have.
which they don't have. So for Quebec Solidaire, I mean, 1 seat, maybe they could make it. They did it last time. They did it last time for both Quebec Solidaire and the PQ. And this time Quebec Solidaire came much closer to the 12 seats. So maybe they can bend the rule. But for the PQ, I don't know what they're going to negotiate. Maybe they won't give them an official status, but they're going to approve like a budget, like a functioning budget, kind of like an operations budget for them, so they can have like a research department and stuff. But they won't make him an official party, so they won't have that much room and that much time during question period. I don't know. This is up in the air. They're going to be negotiating it, but all this to say, and just to wrap that up, in terms of the results, Pascal Bérubé in the Matane, the most popular politician, won by the most popular vote, I guess, 67 or 68%.
Yeah, huge margin.
No surprise there. I mean, Pascal Bérubé, he's royalty in his writing. It's huge, 67%. I mean, that's
No, for sure. And again, it's tough to watch this. It's tough to watch the end of political era, even though it's a party that I know that neither of us support. But you see the decimation of a political, historical, being like the Parti Québécois. It's pretty tough to watch that. So, in the coming days, what's going to be important for a lot of these political parties? What's going through their mindset right now?
Let me ask you something. Sorry to interrupt you, Michael. Let me ask something. If you are Dominic Anglade right now, and your party has suffered 2 consecutive elections, you want to pick it up, and strategically now in the House, you want to implement a little bit more your presence. Do you become that rough person and say, you know what, screw that? I'm not recognizing those parties. I'm not giving those parties official status. I'm getting most of the time. I want the visibility. It's for my own party's survival, and risk being called, the mean person or whatever is going to come, is going to follow from that. Or do you bite the bullet and say, you know what, it would be ungrateful to do that. It would be counterproductive. Let me just give them that status to the detriment of my party, because you're obviously going to get much less time.
Listen, I think that for her, she wants the other opposition parties to have as little oxygen as possible and as little space as possible, and that's restricting their budget. Legault wants the POQ to look irrelevant, and that only helps. That's only helped when he has other opposition parties, being able to have an equal platform or a somewhat equal platform in that sense there. So he'll be in favor.
So the ball really is in Dominique Anglade's court right now. It's up to her.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's something that has to be negotiated by through all the parties. But I mean, at the end of the day, the government is really going to have to decide how they want to have this go forward. It was the CAC that decided back in 2018. The financing that would occur for both Quebec Solidaire and the PQ, which one with 10 seats, so that was under that threshold that they needed to get of 12, and obviously under 20% of the popular vote, for them to have official party status. So there was an exception that was made there in that sense. But I think given the results now, maybe with the standard of 10 seats, that new threshold, that's not codified. That was an exception for the last parliament, for the last legislature. Will that be maintained by Legault going forward? That's the big question. I think part of me thinks that he would want that. Part of me thinks that he would want to do that, and maybe by extension also give the PQ a little bit of a boost. The PQ, I would say, does take a little bit away from Legault's messaging, especially when it comes to the francisation, immigration, things of that nature, which are the bread and butter of the PQ. Maybe it doesn't benefit him to give him give official party status to PSPP, but maybe just give it to Quebec Solidaire.
All right.
I don't know, but I think for Anglade, she would not want her opponents in the opposition benches to have more resources to get attention and get their message out there.
Interesting. Let's quickly get over the point on the polling data. Leger proving once again their credibility.
Absolutely, they were within like a very small margin of actually calling it right on the nose for the election itself. And the thing is too is that every single election, pollster there's hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions of dollars that is poured into polling in Quebec. And this is polling on behalf of news organizations. This is polling done by political parties, by interest groups that are looking, to understand where the population sits on certain issues. And that way they can take that, and especially in the pre-campaign, they can take that data and then go as a lobby group, go to political parties and say, look how many, individuals believe in our cause. These are your voters. These are people that, have a say and they believe in something that we believe in. And that's why it's important that we're lobbying you right now. But in any case, there's a lot of money that's spent, and Leger is one of those larger firms. They're one of those larger firms that has a big presence across Canada, but it is, a fleuron du Québec. And so in any case, they get a lot of criticism because they were, by and large, the PCQ was getting very low rankings from Leger Marketing, very low rankings, the PCQ. Let's break it down in terms of what it was. Leger had the CAQ at 38 from the 2nd of October. The official election results for the CAQ were about 41%. So they were off by 3 points there. But they were underestimating the CAQ. They had the QS at 15%. QS came in at 15% officially from the results. They had the PQ at 50%. They had them a little bit under. 14.6 was the official result. Liberals, they overestimated at 17%. They came in at 14.3%. And for the Conservative Party of Quebec, they had them at 14%. They actually they overestimated them. They actually came in only at 12.9%.
Right.
My point being is that they and Jean-Marc Leger, somebody who's one of the most respected pollsters and political commentators in the country, was receiving death threats from Conservative Party activists, from people saying that he was, trying to discredit Eric Duhaime and trying to, not give him, actually manipulating the polling data itself and calling him fake news. And again, threats to anybody is just completely inappropriate. But my point being is that it goes to show, what he was reporting, the data that he was getting from his pollsters on the ground is really what was occurring in the ridings from the official results, off by a very small percentage. So kudos to him for being really on top of getting that polling data and getting the closest to the official results of any other pollster.
Speaking of the vote percentage, the main question now that is coming up is electoral reform in Quebec. And the reason for that is because you have all three, the Liberals, Québec Solidaire, Parti Québécois, and the Conservative Party, all around 14%, let's say, a little over, a little under. And the way that the electoral system is made here is that the Liberals, with the least amount excluding the Conservative Party. So let's say we take the parties that are in the House right now, CAQ, Liberals, QS, and PQ. From the four parties, the Liberals have the least amount of popular vote, yet they made opposition with 21 seats. And you have Québec Solidaire, Québec Solidaire that has 15%. So the most of all, the opposition that has only 11 seats, and the PQ has 3. Meanwhile, the Conservatives with, just under 13% have 0. Some are calling it, unjust. Some are, calling for a change in the electoral reform. The Liberals are staying very quiet. Obviously, we can understand why, and so is the CAQ, because they got 90 seats. So I don't think anything's going to come from them. But it's interesting. It's an interesting situation. It's the first time I see this.
Yeah, for sure. It's you're seeing, and this happens every election, is that there's always a call for electoral reform, that we need to abolish the first past the post system that we have currently in place, and that has been in place for quite some time, obviously, since Confederation. And it dates back, obviously, to Westminster in terms of the system that we use today. but you look at the breakdown of the vote totals, right? The 590,000 votes, it gives you, 21 seats. 600,000 votes gives you 3 seats, and then 530,000 votes give you 0 seats. All around that same sort of, 550,000 vote marker, you see as you noted, the difference between, the political party final seat counts. It really is. It is quite telling from that perspective. The one thing that I'll note that I think is a little bit important just in terms of the history of this is that François Legault in the 2018 campaign did run on electoral reform
Yeah.
as a major part of his campaign, and that he wanted to reform the electoral system because, again, like you said, it just isn't fair.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to either be a mixed proportional system or there needs to be some sort of a system that's implemented. And he pulled that reform about a year in, or pulled the plans for the reform about a year into going into it, and knew that it was easier for him, it was easier for his party to win under the current system, to get that majority under the current system and stay alive under the current system. So he knew very well that it was beneficial for him to pull that reform. Now, there will be people that are saying that this is important to go forward, that they need to be some sort of reform. It's not going to happen. The one thing that I would say is that he did have one of his candidates, I believe, over in I want to say the René Lévesque riding. I can't remember her name. But my point being is that she came out and said that for her and for the CAQ, that electoral reform is her first priority.
Oh yes, I
when
saw that.
asked by a journalist.
Yeah.
Which is obviously not in line with the Mr. Legault's messaging, and obviously with what the CAC is thinking right now. So definitely needs to pull some of his candidates back in line in terms of going down that route. But I don't think they're going to see any real call for a change on this front.
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of the proportional system, but I do agree, and I'm not a fan of anything that Éric Duhem said in his platform. I mean, I'm not aligned with that, but I do agree that a party like his that manages to get over 500,000 votes, not to have their voice represented, if I don't think it's right. At the very least, he should get some sort of like operation budget, or to be able to do press conferences when he wants to in the National Assembly, like something to guarantee a presence of that party in the House.
And I'm sure François Legault would love that. I'm sure he'd love to give him resources and would love to give, the guy who's coming to, break his legs over in the Quebec City region, as much resources as possible. It's never going to happen.
No, it's not. It's not. But we're just talking about what is fair and what isn't. I mean, I think it sucks for them, to be honest with you. Let's move on, because I know that you have to go soon. Potential cabinet. So we spoke about Legault having he's going to have a hard and a difficult task now to form his cabinet. He has 90 MNAs. Obviously, not all of them have what it takes to become a minister. But now what he has to do is juggle between what he has now and the new people that he wants to potentially bring in. Who gets cut, who doesn't, who moves around, who loses by moving, who gets promoted by changing. I mean, and who gets promoted by changing. What do you think? Any newcomers coming in, or from the people that were there already, who's going to be moved around?
So let's just set the table first and foremost in terms of what spaces we know will be open come the formation of the next cabinet. Daniel McCann, Nadine Giraud, and Marguerite Blais did not run for re-election. And so that opens up higher education. It opens up international relations and also seniors. So these are three places. And we also know that Jean Boulet, because of his immigration comments, has been disqualified from being minister responsible for immigration on that front there. He also had the portfolio of travail, l'emploi,
employment and social solidarity.
So the labor portfolio, essentially, he won't be qualified for that. My point being is that he might very well not find himself with a seat in cabinet as well. So we have to be understanding of that. Then, who do we know is back in for sure? Éric Girard will be staying at finance. Pierre Fitzgibbon will be staying at economy. Sonia Lebel will probably merit something, maybe a little bit more. Maybe she'll be taking on a new economic portfolio because they've been talking about regional economic development. So maybe putting her there on top of a larger portfolio, like a treasury board, for example. So giving her a little bit of additional responsibility with dealing with the treasury board and regions. There also has to be a balance, a parité between the regions which they're very heavy in, and in terms of the seats the CAC won, and also the Montreal, the urban center like that, Quebec City, an urban center like that, and the balance between men and women. It was in 2007 that Jean Charest, he was the first, premier to get in sort of that parité homme-femme.
Yeah, it
And
was almost there. Yeah.
almost, well, within the parité homme-femme has always been between 40 to 60%. That's been the standard rule for la zone paritaire, as they put it in Quebec City. And that's always been the standard that they want there. And then at the beginning of the mandate for François Legault in 2018, he made sure that it was 13 men, 13 women. That was pretty historic from that standpoint. And, it's with 41 women elected to the CAC caucus. That's 45% of the CAC caucus, and that's not a low number right there. So it's the most women, to my understanding, ever elected to the Quebec National Assembly for any political party, and that sends a very strong message there. So again, who do we see then coming in now that we've set the table? Where do we see people going? I think by and large, one of the biggest gains or one of the people that needs to get rewarded is going to be Bernard Drainville. Who's somebody who already has experience at the cabinet table. Martine Biron, coming from Radio-Canada, being a very promising and trusted voice in news media. And then, you also have people like that we want to maintain. François Bonnardel, he's a pillar of the CAQ, fortress, I would say. So I think it's important to understand that. The question is, again, going back to those regions and the fact that we get more women into the cabinet, that's where you're going to start seeing people maybe like an Eric Kerr or a Jonathan Julien, maybe them not being returned to cabinet. They might be ceding their place for more women in the cabinet. You have somebody like Chantal Rouleau on the island of Montreal, who was already minister responsible for Montreal and the delegate minister for transport. She'll probably be coming back.
She'll probably coming back because she's the
somebody. But neighboring next to her, even though it's her neighbor up in Anjou-Luriel, Karine Boivin-Roy, who has experience on the executive committee of the city of Montreal, who was a city councillor in Montreal, who has a very good understanding of municipal issues. Maybe she'll find a way.
Yeah, but municipal issues, so does Chantal Rouleau. That's where she came from. So I think that if he wants to go with experience, I'm not so sure he's going to want to sideline someone like that. Which brings the question to.
I think he keeps both of them inside.
Two ministers from the region of Montreal.
Absolutely, he doesn't have much to choose from. George, he was hoping to pick up seats like Maurice Richard. He was hoping to pick up seats like in Brassard in La Pinière. He was hoping to pick up more seats on the island. It didn't come to fruition.
Mind you, he made some gains in Laval, so I think he's going to maybe focus a lot more there. I see Christopher Skeet going in with a junior cabinet post.
No,
you don't.
No, I don't. I think. Listen, he cut his teeth as parliamentary assistant to the prime minister, to the premier.
The English, the English thing hurt him, I think, too. But
you have somebody like Céline Haïtayan,
with an economic profile as well.
But also was having, dealing with international affairs. She was working for a multinational like Ubisoft. I think she's certainly one of the candidates to consider, but.
That would be sad for Christopher Skeet getting passed on, but I like him. I mean, he's been on the podcast as well. The other thing, though, don't forget that he picked up Rouyn-Noranda. That's a nice little region for him to put a minister in, and he has the first ever woman Indigenous. And an Indigenous woman elected in, I think it's Duplessis, I think.
Yeah, it was Catherine Champagne-Jourdain.
That's right. So I hope he gives them some room as well in cabinet.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I think that's the path he's going down for in that sense. I think that she would definitely play an important role. I don't see her being, for example, minister responsible for Indigenous relations. I think Yann Lafrenière is doing a great job there, and you don't necessarily want to put an Indigenous person in a portfolio like that. It gets very delicate and dicey. Most political commentators would say, and most people that have been working inside of cabinets, especially in the premier's office or prime minister's office in Ottawa, would say it's you never put an Indigenous person in to have to enact the Indian Act. Jody Wilson-Raybould even came out and said this, how it was insulting when Justin Trudeau came and offered her that posting when he wanted to get her out of justice when the whole SNC Lavalin scandal was going on in Ottawa, but that's Ottawa politics.
Yeah.
Um,
the number of ministers. I know that François Legault is not a fan of change. I know, and he said that himself. He goes, "Listen, I prefer having people maintain that expertise and the knowledge they've acquired in their cabinet post, and you just carry that forward into another mandate, which does make sense in terms of efficiency, rather than having people change around and having to learn again all the files." Do you think he's going to increase the number, or do you
I think
pretty
he
much
will.
leave
I
it
think,
around the same?
and you know who gave him cover for being able to increase that number? That's Doug Ford over in Ontario when Doug won a larger majority back in June and had to expand cabinet. Doug's nephew Michael Ford was even running, and he got a posting. He got the immigration portfolio as a minister, so his nephew's in cabinet too. Go figure. But in any case, he got a lot of flack for that. But I think that definitely expanding cabinet to bring in a lot of this talent. It's some of these files, George, are heavy. We know how heavy they are. COVID has made it even worse. I think an expansion of cabinet isn't a bad thing. In terms of some of the less secure positions too, I think that somebody like Jean-François Roberge is out of education.
Yeah,
I don't see him being in there. The Nathalie Roy, was part of the first cohort of elected CAQistes in 2012. I don't see her maybe staying, and maybe she'll be switched to a more junior portfolio because she hasn't really been performing all that well at culture. And again, in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, what will happen to Pierre Dufault, the Minister of Forests? Danielle Bernard is the Rouyn-Noranda former municipal councillor, former Liberal MNA,
Liberal, yeah.
Quebec Solidaire, like you mentioned. With the Halm Fonderie going on there, like what's going to happen in terms of that? Maybe giving him a seat at the cabinet table will help on that from that perspective. And I think, given the composition of the National Assembly, the choice of parliamentary leader is going to be essential too, because I think most people would say that Jean Barrette did a good job. Doesn't come off as the nicest guy in the room, and maybe it would be better to have him focusing on justice issues, pushing and francisation, pushing through 2196, ensuring that they're off to a smooth start as laws. He's in conflict also with the chief judge of the Court of Quebec, but there's no doubt that he will have a place at the cabinet table in itself. So I think
I would see Sonia Lebel as a good leader in the House.
Yeah,
a nice little promotion for her as well. We'll see. I mean, that's going to be interesting. Let's move on over right before we wrap up. The last topic that everyone has been talking about is what's going to happen in the Liberal Party of Quebec. Dominique Anglade came out on Monday night as if she won the election, high-fiving and jumping of joy. And it's not the first time we see that. Probably won't be the last. I mean, they want to save their job. They want to save their position as a leader. So they need to find the positive spin. I'm not so sure there is a positive spin over here. The only one that she managed to come up with was that she maintained the opposition, because that became an issue. And we spoke about that, where it became a race for second place out of the four parties, right? But the members are a little upset, because for the members, the Liberal Party is not there to be in opposition. The Liberal Party is there to govern. And if you're going to be in opposition, at least make sure that you've reinforced that opposition and that you've done better than when you've left off. You mentioned that they start off with 31 seats. They're left with 21 now. So she's lost MNAs. She's lost popular vote. The party is really crumbling under her feet. And she came out and said, this is amazing. We're going to be the best opposition in the next coming weeks, months, and years. We're going to demonstrate to people that the Liberal Party is going to be the best party in the National Assembly. Basically, by saying so, she is imposing her will on remaining on as a leader. We don't know what discussions were had during the first caucus meeting. There's definitely going to be discussions among the leadership of the members. So the riding association presidents are going to be called in for a meeting as well.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure in the back end it's going to look pretty for her.
Yeah, and so a few things on this front. Right now, let's just set the table in terms of what's happening at the POQ. Linda Caron, who was the president up until the day that she was elected in Brossard and the riding of La Pinière, has obviously vacated the presidency. That will be taken over on an interim basis by Carlos Leitao. So Carlos Leitao will occupy the presidency of the party until a future convention, probably in 2023. And during that time, there's a lot of financial constraints that the party has to deal with. They got way less than they got in 2018. And of course, it's $1.70 per vote for each vote that they get. They're going to be getting millions of dollars less than what they got previously over the course of the past 4 years. And so she was able to limit her losses by bringing it to 21 seats, but it's still an historic low.
Yeah,
14.4% of the popular vote. It's going to have a huge hit on the finances. I think it was around 35 candidates only got 15% of the votes, 15% in their ridings there. That's the minimum threshold for reimbursement. It's going to be difficult, I think. And on top of that, the PLQ had also taken out a loan on their permanence in Old Montreal on Queen Street, I think for $5 million that they leveraged against, their property on Queen Street to be able to finance this election. They're going to have to sell that building now for sure. That property is sold. So can you just imagine the Journal de Montréal article that comes out when the PLQ having to sell everything just to stay alive? It's pretty sad from that perspective. On Anglade herself, I think that the people around her advisors, and she was shocked that it wasn't as bad as it was. I think they were expecting probably between 10 and 15 seats, and 21 for them was like, oh my God, maybe I can hold on to my job. Not just her, but her staff as well. And they were just relieved at this point. And
this is the main issue. And I've spoken to a couple members, some other riding association presidents, and it appears that by what she said, don't forget that the entire campaign, she was, we see big, the Liberal Party, we see big, François Legault sees small, we have ambition and they don't. And that whole rhetoric clashes completely with her accepting mediocrity in the results that she got. So for me, there's a paradox over there. And I'm not so sure. I don't know. It's what you said. Like, they're happy that they got 21 seats, but at the same time, it's like, what are you? This is what the party has been reduced to. We're accepting to be mediocre at this point.
Yeah, and I remind you that Andrew Scheer increased the voter seats. Yeah. Sorry, the seats for the Conservative Party of Canada in 2019, and was still pushed out as leader. A bit by caucus and a bit by political movements on the outside too. So it was a mix of both. Aaron O'Toole, again, saw a minor seat reduction when he ran in 2021 for the Conservatives, and was.
But he also increased the popular vote too, I think.
He increased the popular vote, but it was more because he had, betrayed caucus when it came to their environmental platform, where he was going way too far to the center, even to the left, in terms of pushing an environmental plan that just didn't appease the conservative base nor the conservative caucus members. But the fact that he had lost seats on top of that, easy exit for him on that point. So my thinking is that watch the knives come out when the parliamentary session starts up again. Watch the knives come out when people start to see her struggle again in the media. To get airtime, to really, people start realizing, shit, we're back here again in the opposition. It's gonna be like this for
them. I mean, I don't think it's gonna be pleasant being in caucus. And for those wondering, out of the 21 MNAs in the Liberal caucus, there's 10 or 11 that were there from before, and the rest are new. So it's almost half. Logically, and this is just a complete assumption I'm making, the half that came in that are new are probably going to support Dominique Anglade because she's the one that, gave him this chance to run and they got elected. The other half, however, probably won't want her there. They probably look where you brought us. So I'm curious to see how that dynamic is going to evolve in the coming months.
We'll see.
Michael,
we'll have to come back and record another
yeah,
podcast.
exactly. We'll keep doing this. I know you got to go, buddy. Thank you so much for doing this whole series during the campaign. We've been getting comments, and we want to thank everyone for their comments. Thank you guys for doing this journey with us. Michael, we're gonna see each other very soon, I'm imagining. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate the time that you took and all the knowledge that you brought to the show.
I'm happy somebody recognizes it because most people still don't. I have no knowledge to offer.
Damn them, Michael. Damn.
Alrighty, buddy. Take it easy.
All right, take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.